Hello and welcome. Today I'll show you the minority attack, a very common and powerful middle game plan. Let's go. This video will be split up into 5 different segments. Number 1, what is a minority attack? Number 2, how do we do it in a real game? Number 3, the things to watch out for. Number 4, what openings does it come from? And number 5, a famous game in its entirety where this happened very successfully. Let's start with number 1. What is a minority attack? A minority attack, put very simply, is a middle game plan where you take your queenside minority of pawns and launch it at the enemy majority of the queen side. Why is this so effective? Let's take a look. So we're going to take a look at this position, even though this is a pawn endgame, but we're pretending that there's other pieces here. We're talking about middle game plans. So we're pretending there are knights over here, there are bishops somewhere. Just fill in the pieces in your mind as you might expect them. But we're going to isolate this to help learn it a little bit better. And then we're going to fill up the pieces later. The way this is done is by pushing your queen side and leveraging a pawn break in order to create weaknesses. That's the whole point of a minority attack. So let's see how this plays out. Let's say they play a6, we play a4 regardless. They play, let's say, king f8, and we go b5, the pawn break. And this is what creates weaknesses in this otherwise very strong pawn structure. And once we create weaknesses, then we can use our pieces, let's say rooks, knights, whatever, in order to put pressure on those weaknesses and win them. The weaknesses would be isolated pawns, backwards pawns, double pawns. That's what I mean when I say weaknesses. So let's see how this works. Let's say they take us, we just take back. And this situation must create a weakness, no matter what black does. Black has 3 options with this pawn: to take, to push, or to just stay here. If they take, then they have all of their queenside pawns as weaknesses. Every single pawn became a weakness. These are doubled and isolated. This is isolated. So you can imagine the pieces will just go, let's say, rook b1, rook b2, other rook to b1. The knight is on c3 probably. So instantly we're going to recapture our lost pawn. It's not about material, but it's about the fact that when we take this, the remaining pawns are also weak. So we have a much higher chance of putting pressure on them with all our pieces and successfully capturing them. So we're going to take the b pawn, the d pawn, and then we're going to go into any endgame with 2 pawns up. That was if they take. What if they don't take? If they push past, presuming they have a knight defending that or something, so they take with a piece, they will also have created a weakness. The d5 pawn now became isolated. So that's our new target of attack. We're going to put a rook on d1. We're just going to pile up with everything we have and hopefully win it. And the final choice is if they stay here, and this is the best usually for the defending side. Let's say they play a piece move or something. Then we take, they take, but we have achieved our overall purpose of creating a weakness. Now that weakness is the c6 pawn, which is a backwards pawn. So the starting situation was this one, and we have completed our duty of trading 2 for 2. Any 2 for 2 is good for us. Let's say this and this for this and this, or AB for AB, or for BC, maybe in some variations. The remaining pawns must become weaknesses, which we then target with our pieces. Hopefully that makes sense, but just to put a small recap. Number 1, what is a minority attack? It's a type of middle game plan where you launch your queenside minority at the enemy majority in hopes of creating weaknesses, weak pawns that you can then target with your pieces. How is it done? It's done by pushing your pawns, first of all, the B pawn, and if needed, then the A pawn to support the pawn break. The pawn break is essentially what creates that weakness. Small digression in hopes of predicting one of the questions in the comments. A lot of players and new students ask me, how come we just don't go for the e-pawn break? Like, pawn breaks are generally a useful plan. What's wrong with the e4 pawn break? Let's say you have a knight here, so it's sufficiently protected. The point is that your pawn chain is existing here, and there's a principle in chess that says always attack in the direction of your pawn chain. So this pawn chain is pointing towards the queen side, which is our initial trigger that we have to play on the queen side more than the king side, because we have to respect this principle. I'm going to shortly demonstrate why, but this is how you remember that the minority attack should be your main plan over here. Because if you go for the e4 pawn break, why is this principle true? Because if you break this principle, if you go for the center when your pawn chain is saying queen side, after they take and you take back with a knight, you will create weaknesses for yourself. So the d4 pawn will become an isolated pawn, and black is the one who will pile up on this until they win. So remember this principle: attack in the direction of your pawn chain. Generally speaking, every middle game has its own plans that are already determined by the pawn structure. So this rule that I have just taught you, the principle, attack in the direction of your pawn chain, also applies to your opponent, of course. So their pawn chain is pointing toward the king side. So this structure that you're seeing on the board right now is a famous structure that comes from many openings, and it's called the Carlsbad pawn structure. And I'm going to link the article from chess.com when you can learn more about the plans for both sides. But generally speaking, you should know that white wants to go queen side here, black wants to go king side. So it's a bit of a race. They will try to attack with something like knight e4, f5, rook lift, queen coming in. And it's your job to defend their attack long enough for your minority attack to create weaknesses and break through. And similarly, their job is to attack you on the king side before you get a chance to infiltrate through their queen side. So it's a bit of a race. Two quick details before moving on to section 3, what to watch out for. Let's say that this is the position. They go for knight f8, which is a typical rotation to the king side. And I just want to talk about how to actually do this with pieces on the board, because there are some things that are now relevant now that the pieces are on the board. So here we have the bishop that is stopping our b4 move. Previously we just said, oh, play b4, a4, b5, just go. However, this needs to be defended by something. So a lot of players make the typical strategic error, small inaccuracy, of going a3. And this is the first thing I want to talk about, because the correct move is actually rook b1, not a3. Why? Because if you go a3, I'm going to play left and right for the black king, but they're going to go kingside advancements. Just to illustrate this in isolation, how it works. So after b4, black is supposed to play a6 to at least delay you, otherwise you hit the queenside immediately. And now is the core problem. We have to play a4 to support b5, but we have to keep this defended. Because if you play a4, they just take this and say thanks. So now we have to play rook b1. They play something on the king side. We play a4, king side, b5, and usually they can leave it alone. So this is how our attack usually hits if we play a3 first. However, instead of playing a3, watch what happens if you play rook b1 first. So just a move order trick, you first play rook b1, so you're still protecting b4. Watch the difference. After b4 now, they played a6, the same. Now we don't have to play a3 to go a4. We go a4 in one move. So we save a tempo. That doesn't seem like too big of a deal, but whenever the sides of attack are opposite, white goes queenside, black goes kingside, every tempo can make the difference between your game working and not, between your plan coming true before your opponents or after, being one move late. Essentially, when you try to do the minority attack, play rook b1 first to avoid stutter stepping with a3, a4, so you can play a4 in one move. And if they should, against rook b1, play a5, not a problem. Now you can play a3, because they can't go back to a6, so now you don't lose a tempo as you would in the other variation. So after, let's say, kingside move, b4, take, b5 is coming. Next move. And the second small detail I want to warn you about is once rook b1 happens, and all of this minority attack happens, a6, a4, here, I want to warn you about a certain thing, or just give you a heads up more than anything else. After b5, I constantly, throughout this explanation, took with the a-pawn, and then left it alone. Why not leave it alone immediately? Why not just play another kingside improvement or something? Because after some kingside move, we take the pawn and they take back, and because they haven't introduced a takes b, these pawns remain on the board. This is good for white because this is white's area of the board, so chances are that this is just another weakness that we can attack. The more weaknesses you have to attack, the better. So here, let's say we just double up on the b file, we infiltrate through b6, and chances are we will just take that a-pawn for free, and we have a passed a-pawn after that. But in the a takes b variation, these guys don't exist. So that's why if you're defending against a minority attack, you should know to include these. And it's not so much about black having the open file, because black can't really do much here. This is white's area of the board. It's more about not having those a-pawns on the board for much, much later in the endgame. Number 3, the things to watch out for. There's really 2 things to keep in mind of how they can possibly try to mess up your plans and how you can fight against it that I want to show you. So let's say we castle, they play the move knight e4. This is usually their bread and butter. The point is that our bishop on h4 is under attack, so we can't just peacefully out-muscle the knight here. So we're just going to have to take this one. They take with the queen, and now they have enough defenders of e4. So this is the first sort of maneuver to know about. You have to take, they take back, all is good. and we're still wanting to continue our queenside play. So let's say we go rook b1, and your opponent throws a5 at you. And now you're like, I haven't seen a5 before, interesting, but probably I could just go a3, b4, take, b5, like same thing, right? Wrong. The thing is that now if you go a3, because they have the knight on e4, they could just remove the defender and play a4. They would like to play a4 in normal terms, because if this works, then any b-pawn move is met by en passant. Let's just showcase. So after this, here, en passant, and we don't have a b-pawn, we have an a-pawn. And we can't really break all the way here, so there's no more b5 break. This maintains a very strong chain. And for this reason, they would like to play a4, but we would just take it if we had this position to play. But because the knight is here, they could play a removing the defender of this strategic idea. And again, if you push the b-pawn, 1 square, 2 squares, doesn't matter. They take, you take back, and okay, the a-pawn is sufficiently defended, we don't lose a pawn, but it's going to be really, really hard to get the a-pawn all the way up to a6, and that's a lot of time wasted, giving them more time for the kingside attack. Again, remember that it's a strategic race. As well, they could probably pile up on their a-pawn and fight against your attack much better. So for that reason, this is quite problematic. So remember, knight e4 with a5, so that against a3 they have take, a4. This is a typical pattern, and they put us in a bit of a bind. Let's see that just one more time. So here, it's really hard to find something because we don't have a good weakness to play for. Like, this is potentially a little bit weak, but by the time we organize enough attackers of that, that's going to be a lot of time wasted, and I don't see a clear way either. So this is the first thing to watch out for. The way you handle something like this, if your opponent should know about this, is to not allow the trade of the knights temporarily. So you go basically knight a4, trying to use the now weakened b6 square, because remember, whenever a pawn moves, it weakens the squares it was previously protecting. So knight a4 aims to target these squares, and also it does one more very important thing. It induces the move b5. Why do I say induce? Because it kind of is not forced, black is not forced to play b5, but it looks like a very tempting move. And to kick your knight away, because you can't really go forward without getting captured and your entire attack blocked. So essentially you have to go back, but we're happy about that. So in this particular position, if this is the actual position, you just have queen takes c6 like a counter attack. But if they first, let's say, defend the c-pawn to tactically make it work, and then we play a3 to try to go b4, they go b5. Now it's a different story. Now we're happy to go back, because once they take and we take back, now we have the weakness to play for. So we're good. We just pile up on the c-file, queen c5. If they trade, we trade with the rook. Double up rooks, knight e5. Just everything goes here. So that's the inducing weaknesses part. So watch out for this, and watch out for the second important thing. Let's say that the game goes a little bit differently. So let's say maybe like a knight h5, take, like rook ab1, knight comes back in the game, b4, trying to go for the attack, a6, a4, and now all of a sudden they throw b5 at you. And you're like, nobody really said this when I learned this, what do I do now? And then you're back to your own devices, but without proper guidance in this position, it's really hard to know what to do. Because on paper, yes, they pushed the pawn, they weakened the squares they were previously protecting, you probably noticed the c6 weakness, but how do you actually exploit it? And then you're probably thinking, okay, maybe I just move the knight, my queen attacks it, probably didn't defend it, I attack it a little bit, and then your opponent throws something that you couldn't really predict until it's too late. They go knight b6. With the help of the b and d pawn, they have secured the c4 square as an outpost. So even if you take a takes b, they just recapture with the a pawn, let's say. Not a big deal. And knight c4 is unstoppable. And your avenue of attack towards that weakness is gone. So if anybody's better here, it's going to be black. Whatever you do, doesn't matter. Let's say knight e5 improvement, they go knight c4. Whatever you take this with, irrelevant, they're going to get a defended pass pawn, which is a very strong pawn. They take with a b pawn, d pawn, not sure. But the point is that you have a queenside weakness, and their only queenside weakness is completely blocked, and they have a very beautifully posted knight. So if anybody's better, it is black. So watch out for this idea of b5 with the very clean idea of knight b6, knight c4. That's the only follow-up to this. Everything else is just bad. If they take here, I'm thrilled to recapture with my knight. For example, I do nothing. If they don't know about this, or if I somehow block it, If they take here, not a worry. I'm thrilled. There's multiple weaknesses. My knight is coming into the outpost. Easy access to those weaknesses. A file, C file, beautiful. Get the other rook in and so on. So b5 is only about knight b6, knight c4. That's the only thing to watch out for. Once you know that, it's very easy to see what to do against it. So we're going to go a5. It feels weird to block up the queen side like this, but if you stop this one idea from black, you will have access permanently towards c6. And what do you do when you create a weakness? You pile up just like normal. So get all your heavy pieces here, infiltrate this square, use the e5 square for your knight, and so on. Maybe reroute the other knight to help get the e5, and so on. A lot of cool ideas, but the point is that you stop knight b6, knight c4 to retain access to this weakness. Also, watch out for your b-pawn, because commonly I see my students blunder the b-pawn. They play like rook c1, too focused on their own attack to appreciate that this is also a little bit weak. Where does this come from? Which openings do you play to reach the Carlsbad pawn structure? There's quite a few of them. Basically anything that trades the c-pawn for the e-pawn in a decent way. Let me show you a couple. So let's say d4, d5, c4. The queen's gambit declined. This trades the c-pawn for the e-pawn. And already we are in the Carlsbad, especially after I play the moves e3 and c6. You will recognize we have the pawn chain here, they have the pawn chain here. White has the queenside minority attack, which they should go for after development and everything. Of course, white will not play e3 here to kill their bishop, so normal piece development. Let's say here, bishop e7, e3, now c6 to sort of limit the knight. Let's say bishop d3, castles, queen c2, because if knight f3, then bishop g4, pin, and so on. So there's some theory here, doesn't matter too much, but the point is that the structure has been reached. Both sides develop their pieces in any decent way. Let's say knight bd7, knight f3, rook e8 here, and now we are in that position where I have shown you, let's say h6, bishop h4. Now we have shown knight e4 or knight h5 or a couple of decent responses, but we are supposed to go rook b1, b4, a4, b5. Another opening this can come from is another d4 opening, d5, and we have the London system. After c5, a bit of an early c5 variation, and e3, take, let's say knight c6, c3, they're going to play e6 at some point, and now we have the reverse version. Now it's black who has the minority queenside attack, and it's white who has to respect their chain and go for the kingside attack. And it's a very interesting battle. So you can even be reverse colors, but Carlsbad structure. Then we have the Jabava London system, knight c3, so a bit of a different thing. Knight f6, bishop f4, c5, e3, again, take, and let's say a6 to stop knight b5. Jabava London, black is the one who has the queenside minority. So at some point, once we both develop, this knight reroutes to e2 to connect with c3, they go e6, and then you will see the pawn chains like that. And the final example, let's say e4, c6, the exchange Caro-Kann, d4, d5, take, and both sides develop. Black has the queenside minority. So many openings it can come from. Do your research, but that's how you reach the Carlsbad pawn structure. And number 5, the last section, is the example game. We're going to take a look at a famous game played between Benko and Taimanov in 1960. So we're going to kind of scroll through it. Here's another opening it can come from, the English 1c4, with a different move order, but it's going to be very similar. We're going to kind of scroll through the opening, doesn't matter too much, but the critical moment where we reach the structure is c takes, e takes, and minority belongs to white. So let's see how the pieces reach nice squares. Okay, bit of a trade here, knight c3, all good. Rook c1, c6, b4. So now it's uncontested because the bishop is here. Usually it's on one of these two squares, so we can instantly go for it. But b4 is met by a6 to induce a4. And after the move knight f5, aiming to simply get more kingside play and reroute d6 perhaps, we go b5. So this is the pawn break in action, which must force create a weakness. So in this case, we didn't even need rook b1, because as it happens, this bishop was not here, so it's like an easier version, you could say. And we're holding on to our center here quite nicely. Our king is safe, everything is good. Rook e8 played, putting a rook on a better square, fine. However, it was better to go a takes, and then ignore it. This is something we talked about earlier, because if the a-pawns stay on the board, white has a advantage, because chances are that he will win this for free, since this is white's area of the board, whereas black's area of the board is the king side. So black should go a little bit more aggressive with the f and g pawn perhaps, or bishop e6, queen d7 to force the bishops off, remove defenders, add attackers, typical king side attack. However, black was a little bit too slow in this game. Rook e8 played, b takes c, b takes c, and e3, solidifying the center for sure. h5 played, aiming for kingside advancements. Knight e2, rotating knight to f4, and opening up the c file for the rook. Queen d6, defending the attacked pawn. Knight f4. Why knight f4? It's a really nice square, defended, putting pressure on the king side, rerouting possibly to d3 and then to the outpost. Very solid square. So h4 played, and well, of course we never take this. The point of facing a kingside attack when you're on the receiving end is to minimize the action that happens there. A lot of players will feel very reactive and compelled to respond to every single move their opponent makes. So they would play g4 here, kicking the knight away or something. The more action happens on their area of the board, the faster the attack will be. The more action happens here, the faster our attack will be. So if you can ignore your opponent as a rule, you probably should. So here, even though g4 was played, I probably would have just ignored my opponent's attack. I probably just would have gone on to play, I don't know, queen c2, hitting the pawn, just like getting all the pieces that are not at the queen side at the queen side. So g4 is fine. g5 was played though, bit of a counter attack. Knight d3 moving out of it, knight d7 moving out of it with a threat over here. h3 trying to close things down. So in this particular position, it ended up being okay, but I would personally argue that g4 and h3 came closer to the opponent. And now f5 as a pawn break is going to be much faster than it otherwise would if these guys were here. So knight g6, queen c2 played, bishop d7, so this attacked the pawn twice, we have to defend it once again, and now watch this. This is the most instructive part of the game. Watch in the next 5 to 10 moves how white completely dominates the queen side. Now that the king side is relatively close for quite a period of time, he goes knight c5, putting pressure here, threatening to remove the defender. When you have these opposite attacks, we want to go queen side, they want to go king side. The more threats you make, the better. So here, remove the defender and take on c6 is the very simple threat. Rook ec8, adding another defender. Rook b1, aiming for the open b file and infiltration. Or rook b6 or rook b7, we're going to see which is better. But white is in total control over the entire queen side. And notice how these stayed on the board, so that's another problem of black. If these guys weren't on the board, they just have one weakness to hold, and that's fine. And they could build their attack while holding onto this one weakness. But now they have multiple, it's going to be much harder to play. a5, very instructive move. Point is that rook b6 now is an outpost, and it forces the pawn to stay in place. If black could play a5, then we can't attack both weaknesses with one rook. So a5, fixing the weakness of a6 in place, and securing an outpost square. Rook c7 played, rook b6, infiltration. Rook c to a7, defending this for the second time, rook fb1. White's game just flows, and there is nothing black could do. Already white is on the verge of winning, in my opinion. So at knight e7, bishop f1, all the pieces. So when you have an attack like this, you're going to feel compelled to do something like a tactic, like breakthrough. No, you are strategically winning, not tactically winning. When you're strategically winning, your job is to just amp up the pressure slowly, don't take too many risks, and just watch them crumble. Bishop f1, because the bishop is doing nothing. The knight is also not doing too much. So we're including these pieces, not these ones. These ones are perfect. Knight c8 played, rook takes a6, because we overpower them. It's a 3 versus 2 on this pawn. After rook takes a6, take and bishop takes. Queen d8 played, aiming to put pressure on the a pawn, hoping to get that one also, which tries to make up for their previous mistake of not introducing a takes b in the initial pawn break. We make a trade here because we see that we can go a6 to move after and solidify our pass pawn. Bishop e7 aiming to remove the defender, but it's a bit too late for that because rook b7 is already infiltration. Point is that if they try to go remove the defender, they will face a lot of kingside problems because one of the key points of a queenside attack is not just take pawns and be up a pawn. It's either force promotion with your pass pawn, or go to an endgame, 2 pawns up if you win both of these, or the third option, which is relevant now, use the infiltration on the queen side to transfer into a kingside attack. So here, bishop e7 and take on a6 simply fails to quite a few continuations. So our rook is hanging at the moment, but maybe we already get away with knight g5 because after queen b7 we have queen h7. So it's a bit burning bridges. but maybe this works. Maybe just a simple queen b2 aiming for this and putting our queen on a longer diagonal. A lot of cool things that white could do here. So black didn't dare to attack this one. Queen d8 played instead, aiming for another defender here. a7 played, bishop f8, queen f5. We're just inching closer with every move. This bishop is just not playing the game. Bishop e7 played, knight takes g5, bishop takes g5, knight e6 is the brilliant point, because if they take, we just have queen h7, king f8, queen h8. So using the queen side infiltration to get to the king this way. That's the one. So that's why they didn't take, and they played queen f6. But after take, knight c7, the game is effectively over because they have to go rook takes a7, and we just take back. In this position, Taimanov resigned, and Benko took home the victory because the endgame is just very much winning. Let's say bishop d7, because they don't really want to trade. If you trade down, the way you win something like this is just by cleaning up the remaining pawns and promoting. So if you want to not trade and keep it complicated, bishop d7 is your only move, but then there's a discovered attack. So let's say knight takes d5. If you take back this, if not, then the bishop is gone. It's game over. That was an absolute masterpiece by Benko. So from the start of the game, entering the structure on purpose, recognizing the structure and the plans of the structure, launching the minority attack, creating those weaknesses as we mentioned, utilizing the fact that black played suboptimally, perfectly, and simply rerouting the pieces to attack those weaknesses. A little bit of kingside action, not too much, and patching up the kingside, giving us more time for our attack on the queen side. A lot of threats, a lot of infiltration, and once those weaknesses were secured in place, we were able to get piece activity, win those weaknesses even, because we just out-muscled them on the queen side here with bishop f1. And once those weaknesses were won, it was just about finding the finish. So utilizing the passed a-pawn to secure the infiltration square, threaten promotion, launch at the king side at the same time, white just has all the control, demonstrating this absolutely beautifully and taking home a well-deserved victory. And that was the game. Hopefully all of this made sense. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. And that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like on the video if you did, subscribe on my channel to see more stuff like this, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take it easy.